Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. As ever, we have cars coming and going here all the time, and we can't cover them all on video, and I try not to repeat, even though we're maybe doing other jobs on the same car, I try not to repeat things. One car that's just passing through, an owner's dropped it off while he was picking up another car. He's asked us to just cast an eye over it, is this car. A BMW E34 M5. So it's sort of arrived by default really, and as ever this is a working business, so we just squeeze making the videos in when we can really still, in spite of the fact that we've had over, I think we're knocking on for 32 million views on the channel now, which is staggering actually. Never in a million years would I have envisaged that, but here we are. So thank you again to everybody who has viewed and supported the channel. Thank you. We have here an M5 facelift. This is the, as I said earlier, this is the E34. This was the 5 Series, second generation 5 Series. A very handsome car. I used to look after a lot of the ordinary 5 Series and the odd one of these, because they only made 12,000 of these in total. And they were just a very, very well engineered car. I banged on recently on one of the videos about the quality of the stalks and the controls on BMWs, so I can actually demonstrate that firsthand. But this is just a really nice car. I've always liked them. This is the later 3.8 version of the sort of straight 6 that was started off in the M1. We did a video on a BMW M1 that we've had a few of them in over the years for work, and that's sort of an ancestor of this engine, a twin overhead cam, 4 valves per cylinder, 24 valve inline 6. And going back to I'm old enough to have been nerdy in the 1970s and 80s around production car engines, and in the 1970s, particularly with the fuel injected version that came out in the XJS, the Jaguar XJS, and the later XJ Series 2 saloons and coupes. When it was fuel injected, it really came of age, that Jaguar V12 engine, and motoring journalists at the time described it as the finest internal combustion engine in the world at that time, and I actually have reason to agree with them. But then we come on to the 1980s and late 70s, early 80s again, and the BMW straight 6 in its normal form, not in this super rarefied, rather more exotic form, in its normal form, in the humble E30 325i, they had a sort of, I covered this in the video on the 3-litre CSI, or CSL, they had a really sort of quite aged valve gear setup in them, and this was a quantum leap. Even that old engine was described as the sweetest 6-cylinder engine in the world by motoring journalists, and you can sort of understand why, because when you drive them, they've got that sort of, they're just smooth throughout the range, provided the valve gear I'm talking about is quiet at the top end, the cam isn't worn and the tappets aren't clattery or out of adjustment. It's a very sweet engine, that 6-cylinder engine, and in large block and small block forms. So the large block was the 635 CSI, the 6 Series, and the small block was the sort of 2-litre 2.5 in the original E30 installation. It was a jewel of an engine, and the 635 had loads of torque for a 3.5-litre engine. They really did a lot with efficiency, the Germans, and they actually fared quite well in the US with the quite poor quality gasoline that the US was using in the 70s and 80s. Because of the efficiency of their hemispherical combustion chamber, BMW actually managed to still produce quite reasonable power outputs, even with the various strangulations of the US environment. But this is a whole different kettle of fish. As I say, forget the cylinder head with the sort of rockers following the camshaft. This is properly done. It's twin cam, 4 valves per cylinder, as I say. It's the sort of the system that Ferrari, Lamborghini, Jaguar used at the time, which was a bucket with a shim and the cam operating directly on top of the bucket and the valve to keep inertia in the valve train, to keep the weight of the moving parts of the valve train to a minimum. So instead of those rockers on the earlier engines, you simply had the valve acting directly underneath the cam lobe, and that made a big difference actually. It's a lovely bit of kit, this. They do have their foibles, the same as any car had. I don't actually know without taking the cam cover off whether this is a single or double row timing chain, but the timing chains were a weak point on this engine, particularly the single row chains, because the engine has a fairly light flywheel and it has 6 individual throttle bodies. The boy racer's dream. You've arrived if you have ITBs, individual throttle bodies, and BMW had them at this time for this engine. Because of those things, the engine would pick up revs very quickly and go down again, like a racing car engine with a light flywheel, boom, straight round. That actually put a lot of pressure on the timing chain because it was constantly being stretched, either on acceleration or deceleration of the internals of the engine. So got to watch the timing chains. This one is beautifully quiet. This car has just been sold by a very good marque specialist in the UK. I have noticed a couple of minor things, just being extremely fussy as I am, and we'll just look at those. This is the one of the most amazing colours for the M5. This is Avus Blue, named after the racetrack, the oval racetrack just west of Berlin. Well, very similar actually, now I think of it, to the Ford Performance Blue that's on the Mondeo that we're restoring. Not dissimilar colour, but they took the standard 5 Series, no sheet metal alterations to the bodywork at all. They put different infrastructure in. It's still got the steering box. It's still got very old-fashioned front steering on it. It's not a rack and pinion like Mercedes was starting to introduce in the E-Class in 1997-ish, something like that, 96, 97, and obviously BMW went the same way eventually. This is an old steering box, and it has got a bit of play in it. Anything to me that interrupts my interaction and tactileness, if such a word exists, I regard as a minus point. So it's awkward to get at. It's actually located underneath an exhaust heat shield, but I would want to adjust the steering box to bring the steering back to its original spec. One other thing I've noticed is that this windscreen wiper has got an aerodynamic spoiler on it to keep it. I mean, this car tops out at 170 miles an hour-ish, which was fast for a 1990s super saloon. So for that reason, it has spoilers to keep the wipers on the screen. So when you're blasting down the unlimited part of the Autobahn at 170 miles an hour, your windscreen wiper stays in contact with the windscreen. These things are very important. This one, unfortunately, somebody has fitted it with the spoiler on the back of the wiper, not the front. So it's actually 180 degrees out. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm going to actually, this is moments, a work of moments, it really is, he says. Just talk amongst yourselves. We'll obviously have to edit this. Et voila. The windscreen wiper now has the spoiler on the correct side, so it doesn't lift off the screen at high speed. It actually sticks to the windscreen. The other thing I've noticed, again, as I say, I think this is something of a high point in BMW engineering, this era of car. The 3, 5 and 7 Series were all brilliant cars in the 1980s. Keep an eye on the rear suspension, the rear cross-member bushes, because they can go and they cause wayward handling and knocks. But another thing is, because the door hinges are so well engineered on this car, what can happen is they're built to fine tolerances. The hinges are engineered to a very high standard, but they can, over time, start to get sticky. And this door, I can tell immediately, is not working properly. It's actually, if I try and close it, it sticks. So I'm going to get some spray and just spray the hinges on this. So I'll just use a cloth to stop it going everywhere. Just a simple little drink. Just try it a few times to free it off. Sometimes things get worse before they get better. Oh. There we are. These were also, in the 1980s, one of the first cars to have triple door seals. You've got 2 door seals on the doors, and then 1 on the body shell itself to virtually eliminate wind noise. It's just these small things that make such a difference. But anyway, we'll have a quick look around the engine compartment and then we'll take it for a run. Okay, so here we have this beautiful piece of German engineering. And the throttle linkage is just as highly engineered as everything else. But you have got this very spindly throttle cable. You barely put that on a push bike to stop yourself. And that is, again, one of the Achilles heels of these cars. I know several people who have had these and actually sold them because they found the performance disappointing. And they sent the car back to the BMW specialists or dealers or whoever it was. And they actually, they couldn't work out why the car wasn't pulling the way it should. And this is something, again, I did this a long time ago in my Ferrari 456 video. This is critical. If that cable stretches, you won't get the full power. Nothing like it. So I'm going to just open the door and mash the throttle to the floor. And we should get a nice click if this is set up properly. I genuinely don't know whether it is or it isn't, but we're about to find out. Okay, let's try this. Yes. Good. Somebody has done it. And actually we can see this threaded bit here is quite far out of the adjuster. Somebody has actually wound that cable out. They've obviously been watching one of my videos. They've wound that cable out to the point where it's actually opened the throttles properly, which means horsepower and fun. A little bit of tappet noise is actually perfectly acceptable. The quality of this engine is not dissimilar to the Mercedes W124 E500. Same sort of concept. Obviously this is 6-pot, the Mercedes W124 Cosworth was 4-cylinder. But because a thousandth of an inch can make a big difference to the valve clearance and actually cause noise or not, these tappets will be perfectly set. But there's one noisy there, and there's one noisy there. They're inlet valves, but that's actually all right. That's fine. The difference is minuscule. They will be in tolerance, but just towards the wider end of tolerance than the narrower. But that's absolutely fine. That engine sounds exactly as it should do. Yeah, as you may have gathered, I'm itching to take this for a drive. So let's do it. Well, as ever, the T's and P's are up to scratch, although the instrumentation on this for a super saloon is remarkably minimalist. A speedo, a rev counter, a fuel gauge, a temperature gauge, and an econometer, which has been usefully turned into an oil temperature gauge on this car. And I can detect a driveline vibration there, which feels to me like the center bearing on the prop shaft. So we can have a look at that. And I suspect the person he bought the car from will want to put that right, but if not, we can do a catch-up video on that. And I'm immediately struck by this play in the steering. It's very, very small, but it makes a big difference. I know I've talked about this before, old-fashioned steering systems, a steering box as it's called, as opposed to a steering rack. there is the world of difference between them in terms of precision. Mercedes and BMW at the time tried to make this as sporty and as precise as possible, but with the steering box you are always on a bit of a loser. Ferrari had the same with the Daytona, Lamborghini with the Espada, etc. And the steering box by its very design is always going to be less than a steering rack. But what the manufacturers did to compensate for it was to increase the ratio. So in other words, for any given steering input, you change direction far more and the steering was more direct. But I can tell, I mean, that's lost motion in the steering there. I'd want to get rid of that. And again, we've got that driveline vibration. Nevertheless, this car feels very lovely indeed to drive. It's amazing. I was just reflecting on this. We've got 3 of the 1990s super saloons in at the moment, coincidentally. The E500 Mercedes that we did a video on a while back, the Lotus Carlton, and this, all very, very similar concepts. And I'd just be interested to know if anybody can think of an American or Australian super saloon which would live up to this. So mid-90s, early mid-90s, 170 miles an hour, over 300 brake horsepower, 4 doors, and not one-offs, not specials, but a sort of production car. There you go. There's your mission, should you choose to accept it. And again, we've got that lovely stalk action from the indicators. While we're here, I'll just take the opportunity. So this was sort of standard BMW fare in the 1990s, and they're just great to use. Never mind this, is it on, is it not, does it self-cancel? Just beautiful. Very precise. There's no lost motion in that switch to speak of whatsoever. Even after 118,000 miles, it is still beautifully precise. And why would you not want that? Because it's something we use hundreds of times every time we drive a car on a reasonable journey. And that straight 6 obviously is not torquey because of the nature of the engine. It's a cami engine with the power more at the top end. But even so, it's once you open those 6 throttle butterflies, even gently at 1500 RPM, the response is immediate, and it's very well insulated. Jaguar brought the first double bulkhead design out, where you've got one bulkhead at the end of the engine compartment and another one just slightly further back. And I think they brought that out on the XJ Saloon, and it meant that you were far more insulated from the engine. And almost every car manufacturer has followed suit to a greater or lesser degree. Okay, so we're at 2000 RPM, 23 miles an hour. Let's open the taps and actually see the other side of this character, of this car. There we go. And the power curve is utterly tremendous. It just builds and builds and builds. It's just beautiful, right up to the 7,000 RPM red line. And of course they could have taken it far higher than that. I mean, a lot of production engines these days go up to well over 7,000 RPM. But this, in its day, was magical. And this engine, of course, related, as I said earlier, to the M1 engine, and we've had a few of those in over the years, and they are one of the most surprising cars to drive that I have ever encountered. I thought I'd be disappointed when I first drove an M1, I think 30 years ago, and I was not. It was just a wonder. The sort of cabin put me off with the 3 Series switchgear, but here we go again. But the driving experience was fantastic. Okay. Just amazing. Thanks, Mr. Lorry. And the handling, this is somebody else's car and it's wet, but the road holding in the wet, I know from experience, is pretty fantastic. Actually, given the right tyres, these really do stick to the road. Here we go again. So at 4,000 RPM, and it just builds and builds and builds. There's the push. The final 1,000 RPM between 6,000 and 700. Just absolutely sensational. Very satisfying, and it feels as though it feels bulletproof. I mean, timing chain issues notwithstanding, provided they're changed and looked after, and the sprockets, this thing feels as though it could go on forever. Very, very typical German build quality. The whole front of the car, even though it's heavily spring weighted and damped, the front of the car on acceleration, there's so much torque, it just lifts the front of the car. Here we go. Literally pulls the front off the ground and down again when you take your foot off the throttle. There is something wonderful about individual throttle bodies, and if you do have ITBs, they are always very close to the inlet valves. Very close. That's the nature of them. They are never far away because you lose that throttle response. So any car, either with carburetors or injection, that's why you get such neck-snapping acceleration. Here we go again. You will never get that with a single with a single throttle, with all 6 cylinders trying to suck through it. It has to be ITBs every time. Just gorgeous. What an absolute pleasure. And again, the brakes feel very sure-footed for a 1990s car. On these, the brakes are well servoed. They're of a laughable size compared to modern hypercars, but I guess 170 miles an hour isn't as special these days as it was in the 90s. But what a great piece of machinery this is. This is the later 3.8 M5. The early ones were 3.4 or 3.6. I can't just remember off the top of my head. But this is round about 340 brake horsepower in European trim. And every one of them is there. Just so much mid-range torque. And it just builds and builds and builds. This feels like a 4-door supercar. Even today, that engine is magical. It really is. No excuses need to be made for that. All present and correct. Ready for action. Yeah, a special car this, still, and very understated. The body kit was different for the M5 from the standard E34. In fact, it actually made it less aerodynamic. This car is less aerodynamic than the standard BMW 5 Series. And the reason for that is particularly around the lip spoiler at the front end there, which is painted silver on these. They have brake cooling ducts in them, which the standard 5 Series doesn't have to the same extent. And they've decided to, they sacrificed a bit of aerodynamics for brake cooling, which is understandable if you're blasting around the Nürburgring. It's a cliche to say a car shrinks around you when you drive, but this one really does. Brake, double D clutch, heel and toe, round the bend. Beautiful. This does not feel like a 5-seater 4-door saloon once you start pressing on it. It really does shrink around you. This is a towering achievement. I've underestimated these. Looking at it through fresh eyes now, this is a great car. Well, I have to tear myself away from this car at some point, and I have to say, This is the end of another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Thank you. Please subscribe. It is important. It does help the algorithm. And we'll be back with something else very soon.